It's the 19th of January 2021. Hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing good today. On this stormy day on the East Coast. So Taiwan has a ban on 5 prefectures. Most of the world had a ban on 14 prefectures for food imports. Taiwan doesn't recognize the nuclear meltdown for some reason in the capacity of a nuclear meltdown. They're gonna like, it didn't really happen, so we're gonna do this. It's okay, I get it. But Taipei Times is a newspaper, allegedly, and they cover a lot of news. They have a voracious appetite. They're a huge organization. They get their own building and everything, big shots. Action needed on Japan food banned. This is an English newspaper, one of the few outsiders that is printed in English and published across the country. And there's a lot of English-speaking people in Taiwan. And so they're advocating that Taiwan lift the ban on the 5 prefectures that are still banned, when it should be 14 like the rest of the world was doing. But what happens is, over the last 10 years, the nuclear industry has put people in key positions in different countries to get the ban lifted. It's 100%. They didn't need to bother in Canada. Canada gave it up after 93 days. Canada's like, oh, nobody else will take it, we'll take it. Nobody can tell the difference. Most Canadians are sleepwalking anyway. Is it high time that the ban on imports of Japanese food products from 5 prefectures after the March 2011 Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster is lifted in its entirety? It's a really interesting way to frame that one. Because in reality, if they're being honest, the entirety should have included all 14 prefectures. Now, Taiwan's nuclear universities, after Fukushima nuclear meltdowns happened, a very huge nuclear university and pro-nuclear community. They had over 2,000 people at the universities, according to a news article, that were spamming the internet constantly, claiming that Fukushima didn't happen, or it's harmless and it's no problem, it's like a banana and a potato chip. They were challenging every Twitter, every Facebook, every video with the comments on it in order to play down the significance of it. Imagine, as a university student, that's your chore. Because there's a nuclear meltdown, you got to go out and protect your future. So don't let anybody get out of harm's way. You got to keep the children there so we can study them like lab rats. The whole story is just morbid. Action needed on Japan food banned. I mean, this is also a country that's been deceived by the nuclear industry in its own capacity, where the brilliant nuclear industry wanted a nuclear dump, so they went to the natives in the north of Taiwan called Orchard Island on a native reserve, and asked them could he set up a canning factory for salmon. And the natives were like, yeah, that's fantastic. And they set up a nuclear dump there. Didn't tell them. Told them it was, no, it's not a nuclear dump, it's a canning factory. That's the nuclear industry in Taiwan. And it's obviously, they caught the editors of this media with their pants down and an altar boy or something, because now they're trying to poison the entire country with radioactive food. And in my books, that's called sedition. You're in a country where you're trying to convince through deceit and dishonesty and deception to import food from a nuclear wasteland. My God. Why don't you go get a real job, you piece of scum? The Taipei mayor, chairman of Taiwan People's Parties, in 2019 referred to the 2018 referendum question, because they had a referendum in 2018 on lifting the ban of radioactive food from Fukushima, he called the ban feeble-minded. He said the issues should be solved scientifically, which has all been captured by the industry, right? Where they claim it's like a banana and nobody says, no, wait a second. Bans should be lifted in one go, and that's the difference between you getting sick and dying and you not getting sick and dying, by the way. Bans should be lifted in one go. That's another headline. So they've been pushing it hard. And the editor-in-chief of the Liberty Times, which is the big sister, like Cinderella and the older sisters, is what you're kind of looking at. So they're growing food right by nuclear waste. Why should you trust them? And not only that, they're growing it in an evacuated community alongside the nuclear waste. You got to drive past tens of millions of bags to get there. There actually is people on the planet, apparently, according to the picture, that they're stupid enough to grow food and harvest it right alongside the nuclear waste. That's the very definition of stupid. You're stupid. When you grow food across from any kind of a dump, let alone a nuclear dump, you're the definition of stupid. You're literally stupid to do something like that. And again, the Taipei Times is calling for poisoning and murdering because children are way more susceptible to this stuff. Incredibly dangerous, inconsiderate, savage thing to do. It's a hateful thing to do to want to import food from a nuclear wasteland. It's a hateful, despicable thing to do. It's a crimes against humanity, and it's a genocide. It's a coward thing to do, where they do it with a typewriter. It's a coward. It's a coward. Such a coward thing to do. Talks focus on ending the Japan's food ban. Talks focus. This is absurdness. They're growing food right alongside the nuclear waste. Your children eat it for sure. They're going to be underweight. They're going to have problems concentrating, etc., etc. And as you get a bit older, this will manifest in other illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries until your whole country has some kind of ailment that is debilitating in the next 5-10 years after consuming this constantly. You're talking about consuming it constantly. It's bad enough to consume it accidentally. It's terrifying to consume it because you can't escape it in your supermarkets. The people that advocated wasn't that long ago to be 100,000 people calling for to haul their heads right off their shoulders because they're monsters. A short, quick stop from a long rope. KMT divided on issues of Japanese food imports, but that doesn't tell the story. Statement that it would not oppose food imports from 5 Japanese prefectures caught the party's caucus by surprise. So I mean, the nuclear industry either buys off or replaces certain people until they can get the ban. So you can poison 300 million people with the stroke of a pen. If you got to wear outfits like this in a nuclear wasteland to plant food, you're an idiot and a murderer. Everybody that harvests food is a murderer from the nuclear wasteland and ships it to other people who don't know any better. Japan raises food ban issues at talks. Again, the Taipei Times has consistently in the last 3 weeks advocated strongly, vehemently to lift the ban in its entirety, and in desperation in the last number of posts in the last 3 or 4 days, with a post each day showing their desperation to get the food ban lifted so they can poison everybody in the country continuously, sustained until everybody is sick. It's disgusting. Urged Taiwan to address this ban on agricultural imports from Japan's Fukushima prefectures. This is not a hard debate to win, by the way. Well, you picked up 60 million one-ton bags in 3% of the land. So every time it rains, all the 3% that you picked up is recontaminated immediately. This is, you can live in fantasy.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored.
This was 150,000 sites like that. Taipei Times. Food import issues crucial to ties with Japan. So you figure a trade pack is worth getting everybody eating radioactive food all day, every day, sustained until everybody gets sick and worse dies. Is worth doing that. Well, import your food from somewhere else, moron. And get a trade pack with them, moron. Chicken necks. Food import issues crucial to talk. You don't need friends like Japan, trust me, at all. You're a parasite, whoever wrote that. That's a parasite. Yang Cheng Yu. You're a parasite, William. You're parasites to write something like that. You should be charged with sedition and, if allowed, publicly hung, certainly locked up for the remainder of your life for attempting to murder everybody in Taiwan. It's despicable. It's 100% criminal to suggest that food from a nuclear wasteland has no adverse side effects. There's around 1,800 illnesses, for goodness sakes, will show up before cancer. Your immune system is immediately compromised. Food imports issue critical to ties with Japan, and then quoting an academic who doesn't bother acknowledging that the place is completely contaminated with the worst nuclear accident in human history. Lifting the Japanese food ban editorial. All of those should be at least charged with sedition. The papers should probably be seized and liquidated to pay out outstanding debts, and the money should be used to help Fukushima recover. Editorial, lifting the Japanese food ban. Following a referendum in December 18, it expired 2 years later. They're like, well, it expired. Let's pour food in now. Radiation doesn't go away in 2 years. It's absurd that the referendum only had a 2-year lifespan. Again, you can almost feel the nuclear industry's fingers in that one. Following the Fukushima Dai-ichi nuclear power plant disaster. I'll show you pictures of it after. Disaster! If it was only a disaster, I wouldn't even bother with it. The president wants to lift the ban, claims Taipei Times. Not least because of what it would mean for Taiwan's applications to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Nobody should be joining that Trans-Pacific Partnership with Japan. The last thing you want is export or imports coming from Japan. Japan has already demonstrated clearly it's not fit to be trusted. It's poisoned the entire planet and is in the process of killing both the Pacific and the Atlantic. And we've done the research expeditions. And now you want to ship food in so the children are eating it all day, every day, the most vulnerable of society. You're not wicked, you're just plain evil. You're just a criminal. You're just a criminal, the people that advocate something like that. You're not an academic, just because you got a degree don't mean you're not a monster. A monster. Lifting Japan's food ban again in a nuclear wasteland. Would you go live in that house there, Mr. Editor? No, of course not. Year of Taiwan, says Japanese representatives. Nevertheless, he said the farmers in the nuclear wasteland are working hard on food safety. Well, it's not their job to try to make the food safe from a nuclear wasteland. They're not supposed to be there. You're not supposed to grow food in a nuclear wasteland And then there would be no debate about shipping it into a country because that's the moral and ethical thing. Anything less is criminal. Taiwan and the criminal genocidal Japan are discussing the matter, and Japan is waiting to see if Taiwan removes the ban from a nuclear wasteland. Food products contaminated by radiation cannot be imported to Taiwan, despite the fact they were many times and were caught doing it. But no samples of Japanese food have been found to exceed the legal standards. Before Fukushima happened was 0.1 becquerel a kilogram. After, it was 100 becquerels a kilogram. We're only talking about gamma. They're not actually looking ever, under any circumstances in the last 11 years, for alpha or neutrons or betas. Like, how can you not look for neutrons like uranium and plutonium and curium? How the hell can you not look for that? You wicked, hideous, despicable, disgusting blight on humanity, nuclear industry, you. Lawmaker asked Wu if the government would start negotiating with Japan about lifting a ban on the imports from the nuclear wasteland and its 4 radioactive neighboring prefectures after a meltdown. It's meltdowns, you sack of doo-doo. Apologies. Following a tsunami. You always got to put that in there, as if the tsunami... The number 1 reactor started melting down before the tsunami got there. The pipes were cracked from the earthquake. He said the ban should be lifted if no radiation is detected in Japanese food products. There is no safe limit, period. And just because the industry had no opposition, no debates, no dissenting opinions, the whole country, they recognized 14 prefectures are radioactive because they picked up around 60 million one-ton bags. And if you put a one-ton bag in the back of a pickup truck and put those pickup trucks bumper to bumper, that's 60 or 10 rows of traffic right around the entire planet. The Taipei Times is the only printed daily English language newspaper, and it's published by the Liberty Times Group, which I haven't really went down a rabbit hole on yet. And so you're talking about a nuclear wasteland where it's still not safe for anybody, despite the victims being there. And that they got one community where they have 3,000 fake Geiger counters. And we know they're fake because they're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of one-ton bags that are, say, 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. That's not reflected in the public Geiger counters. And they, like you say, got one town alone had over 3,000 of these fake Geiger counters. Okay, and now, where's the big picture? Bear with me. Now, I just removed 50,000 of these little clicks, you see. That's one click right there, right? Before we went live, I had removed over 50,000 of the previous stuff that we've done in 2021. Just so the system would work a little bit faster, hopefully. Seems to be coming along. I never got a chance to restart it. So first off, you got reactor 4 over there and Medusa number 3. You got reactor 2. That's reactor 3 again. Completely gone. They're completely destroyed. Reactor 1. And 150-foot buildings you're looking at. You can see these reactors detonate. That's an incredible detonation. Reactor 2 also detonated. But it went China syndrome eventually after several days. It burned continuously for several days. And then it went down into the earth where it cracked the earth. and the steam coming out of the ground is lethal doses. Unit 2 completely liquefied, 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Unit 3 was only left a stub of the 190-foot building left. And you can see by this detonation, that's the reactor core and the fuel pools going up in the air. That's 4 decades of reactor cores that were in the fuel pools coming down, and now they catch fire and burn. Number 3 is actually gone. They're telling you number 3 fuel pool, right? But number 4 fuel pool to your left is gone, and so is number 3 to the right. And then number 3 was the mixed oxide fuel, the highly lethal, incredibly lethal mixed oxide fuel. And everything's right by the now you see some of these headlines. April 6, 2011. The Fukushima reactor leak plugged with liquid glass, which is a mixture of sawdust and newspaper. You think sawdust and newspaper is going to fix that? Or that? We're 190-foot tall buildings, by the way. So sawdust and newspaper fixed that. The explosion was caused by the earthquake. So again, reactor 1 is 100% inventory for 4 decades was lost, radioactive fallout. This is why they picked up 60 million bags. Reactor 2 was 100% lost. The fuel pool also melted down. All containment of both of those reactors were lost. And again, to describe the fuel pools, they're at the very top. There's 2 of them at the top of the buildings. They don't have a repository in Japan, so decades of reactor cores are stored in that. Stay with me. This was reactor 4, but they're pretending that it's perfectly fine. The reactor fuel pools, which are around 6 million pounds in each of, not counting the reactor, was about 1.6 million pounds, which were the biggest in the world at the time, and are 800-ton reactors, which Chernobyl was 200 tons, mostly graphite. These are pure uranium plutonium. But rather unusually was in 2021, in January, they released 736 pictures. New ones in January 2021. I'll show you a couple of them right now. And they were from a drone. They happened to be very high quality. And I zoomed in on the pictures, and I started noticing everything is pixelated. In the background up there is the common spent fuel pool, which is not that far above sea level, by the way, and the ocean ran through it, around 45, 50 feet high. And when you look at all the pictures and you zoom in on them, you see all the reactor buildings and the common spent fuel pool are completely pixelated out. You were talking about an obscene amount of at least 10 million pounds that they emit to in the common spent fuel pools. There was around 12 million pounds at the top of both of each reactor building in 2 fuel pools. And in context behind it is containers for transport trucks. So for Taiwan, I want you to think about the average disposition. Now this is United Nations numbers. I'll show you that in a second. 137 just gamma in the soil in the places where they're going to be shipping food to Taiwan. United Nations Scientific Committee, and these are degenerate scum, by the way, but they only acknowledge gamma on top of that, the despicable scum. So average disposition density in the soil is the second row. The first row are the people in those communities. The second row is the gamma counts, not millisieverts, not microsieverts, not unisieverts, which is how they get away with murdering everybody, but actual atoms that are pulsing energy every second of certain isotopes. This one they're acknowledging only gamma cesium. Despite the fact that, by the way, that UN says no adverse health effects from Fukushima, they should be arrested for genocide too. These numbers tell a different story. Fukushima City at 230,000 counts per minute on your Geiger counter. And mine's not up there, and I apologize. I can turn it on in a few minutes if I remember. So all of these communities, you don't want to eat food from that. That's just gamma. They're not acknowledging all the other isotopes, by the way. I'll get out of the way in case you want to take a screen capture. So the second row of numbers, which is the one to the right, and then to your left is the corresponding different communities. That's a huge range of people that are contaminated. Incredibly, they're breathing it in constantly. Air samples in Tokyo were 270,000 times more contaminated than global weapons fallout peak. The northern, east, and Great Lakes of the northern hemisphere were contaminated heavily, but it was also, this model is only a 20-day model. That's a 20-day model. Don't ask me. That wasn't supposed to happen. I fix it, maybe. Who knows? Kind of fixed it. High levels of radioactivity extensively. Up to even 150 kilometers away from Fukushima, the air is as radioactive as areas close to the meltdown. Well, that's true for the northern hemisphere. You don't want to eat food from a nuclear wasteland. You can't buy that, allow that to come into your country, fill up your supermarkets like Canada done, and poison everybody in increments over time. It's unconscionable. There's no need to murder everybody just because you got a job that lets you do that. It's actually evil to murder everybody. Hang on now, I'll get some Taiwan, because we've covered in 2018, they had the referendum. We covered the referendum for 6 days. Right? We tried to talk sense to the people that were speaking English for 6 days. And let me figure out what I'm supposed to type in here. So this, I deleted 50,000 clicks. Like that's one click there. Out of my session tonight. It feels weird, man. I backed the session up though, so I can restore it. But food. World Trade Organization. I used to have one here for Taiwan. My God, I got so much on food. Yeah, Taiwan food. Look at that. Right, and so I remember doing this one. This was a couple of years ago now. So this one, I was trying to show the purveyors of lies, and by proxy then the purveyors of misery and agony, so that anybody can understand it. And I had a file on New Scientist studies, child advocacy in the nuclear age. In 1943, amidst the nation's mobilization in the Second World War, there appeared an article by Dr. William Smith of the Children's Bureau on the susceptibility of young people to the hazards of radioactive materials. And reviewing the literature and invoking generally accepted pediatric principles, Dr. Smith concluded that young people pose special vulnerabilities to the hazards of radiation, and that this warranted their exclusions from employment in the gas mantle and radium dial industries. And so feeding the children much more carcinogenic stuff, go get a real job. Don't say yes to it. Just go get a better job where you don't have to murder millions of people so you can get a paycheck. Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid and murder all your friends and your families and your loved ones. Radiation disaster in children. The special medical needs of children make it essential that the pediatrics be prepared for radiation disasters, including the detonation of weapons, nuclear power plants, events that unleashes a radioactive cloud, and the dispersal of radioactive isotopes by conventional explosives, like United Kingdom done 700 times in Australia, or the collapse of a transport vehicle, which happened in Canada 2 years ago by Chalk River. And any of these events could occur unintentionally or as an act of terrorism. And nuclear facilities, power plants, processing centers, and food, the most scariest thing of all, food irradiation facilities, are often located in highly populated areas, and they risk breakdowns. So you see him acknowledging how normal stuff they're using is dangerous. Imagine the actual fuel. So these children, these Geiger counters, everybody's wearing these suits, these useless suits. They burn them each day, by the way. Fear-mongering in Fukushima. Fear-mongering about Fukushima radiation is damaging. Local official, Japan must be the only place in the world with several million becquerels of radioactive isotopes in the urban areas. And Tokyo was at 29 million becquerels a square meter. And comparably high radioactive blue algae on school routes, which they estimated at around 20,000 becquerels a kilogram, whereas children were walking past at a beta. Fukushima radiation dose, these are studies to the left saying that scaremongering about Fukushima is damaging. This one is Fukushima radiation dose was equivalent to an X-ray. Well, 2 X-rays on a pregnant woman, the baby is 50 times more likely to have problems when they grow up. Fukushima radiation dose was equivalent to the X-ray, says scumbags. Senior scientists, irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. Because you're eating it, you're consuming it. Now it's billions of times worse because it's constantly hammering every second all your organs from internal. New scientists, Fukushima dose was equivalent to an X-ray. Yeah. 1 million becquerels a kilogram of just gamma detected at Fukushima school after being decontaminated. And the despicable academics were producing studies saying it was equal to an X-ray. New scientists, an epidemic of fear, and rightfully so. 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, and the limit they're using is 100. But Chernobyl showed us 11 becquerels a kilogram of just gamma. In children, you start to see heart problems. 50 becquerels, it's irreversible heart problems. But if you're eating that each day, it doesn't take long to bioaccumulate 50 becquerels. Fukushima wildlife breeding unaffected by radiation, which is an incredible lie, by the way. Hospital was also showing 40% of Fukushima visitors show internal exposures to radiation. So that meant all the animals. That should have been there, not the other one. Birds that are unable to fly allows humans to touch them. Tokyo had third highest gamma levels of all testing locations throughout Japan. Yeah, and we see numbers, staggering numbers, by the way, in North America at 220 million atoms per liter of rainfall. Let me jump to that other one. Hang on. Let's march across Japan. Look at the radiation numbers as you go across Japan. Voila. It was all of Japan, but they acknowledged 30,000 square kilometers. So I'm going to walk you across Japan, going south. 100 hours after the quake, we hear radiation levels are up even in Tokyo. That's within 100 hours. Tokyo is like 220 plus kilometers away. Remember, the food, right, in Chiba, right alongside of Tokyo, 20 kilometers from Tokyo, is banned by every country in the world, including currently Taiwan. How can Tokyo not be contaminated and every prefecture in between? Radiation doesn't skip prefectures. France says Japan lost control. France should evacuate the country. 1,500 tons of highly radioactive sludge. This was the water sediment from a place not far from Tokyo. They have 51,000 tons, bags of sediment from the water reclamation filters, water filtration system. 50,000 pickup trucks of radioactive sludge. So everybody was poisoned. How could you eat food from a nuclear wasteland? Why do that? Why not grow it somewhere else? Highly radioactive sewage excrement, cesium levels at 334,000 becquerels per kilogram. Their excrement in the sewage. These are insane numbers, by the way. Debris from their Fukushima nuclear plant is being ground up and burned in other parts of Japan, which is brain damage, obviously, to people that are doing that. These are dirty bombs, constantly liberating isotopes into the environment. That's another thing about Japan's food, is every time they got pollen, the pollen is radioactive. The reactors of China syndrome, so you still have huge amounts of radiation coming up from the holes in the grounds. Disposal of quake debris begins in Tokyo to be burned in Koto. Radiation fears will continue for years. Over 1 billion pounds of radioactive material. They're just going to burn it and liberate, because you can't destroy the isotopes, and liberate it back into the environment. Japan to burn drums of unprocessed radioactive waste from the nuclear accident. Facility to be built 100 kilometers from Tokyo in Ibaraki. This is, how can you, if you've done this in any other country, there'd be incredible uproar. They found plutonium in every sample, which is why it was banned in 14 prefectures. Iodine-131 detected in Tokyo, 350 becquerels a kilogram at Kit's garbage facility. Now, they used the iodine as a deception. And so it's only got an 8-day half-life, so it's gone right away. I had somebody in the comments section done it to me recently, actually. I got to go burn them at some point. Let me see if I can find it. Let me check here. No, I won't find it. There it goes. That's not it. Hang on. I'll get it. I could do this. So he's replying to a comment on Japan expert explains discharges of Fukushima wastewater into the sea. I left a comment. Japan's National Cancer Center said number of cancer patients rose by 865,000 in 2012, a year after Fukushima. And I put in a whole lot of other headlines just for badness earlier this week. They came back and said iodine can be released a few days after the accident. Since the half-time is 8 days, it's long time gone. And then try to blame cancer and natural stuff in the environment, etc., etc., etc. And I mean, that's despicable to do something like that. To come in, and whoever that is, obviously with the nuclear industry, doesn't understand that I know better, or that the people that are going to read the comment are going to know difference. Is the government trying to contaminate every region in Japan by burning radioactive debris? And if everything and everyone and all the food is contaminated in a relative sense, nothing or nobody is? Incinerating radioactive material can contaminate the environment. What? Really? That's amazing. Fukushima plant will burn radioactive waste. Incinerators run around the clock. Way to go, Japan. Morons. Radiation everywhere. Burning Fukushima debris 10 miles from a nuclear meltdown. Very, very, very bad. Severe impact on the oceanic environment. An unpredictable amount of damage to the Pacific Ocean. It was total, right? It's an extinction event. We've done the research. And you go back a couple of videos, you'll see some of that research. Just like 3 videos back about marine. You'll see pictures on the front of it. Hang on. What's the point of talking? So the Fukushima nuclear meltdown and species die-off. At the very beginning of it, somewhere in the first 10-15 minutes, I cover my expeditions of Vancouver to Alaska. That's an extinction event. So massive radioactive waste buildup in Tokyo. How do you get radioactive waste buildup in Tokyo, Dana? Well, the whole place is just incredibly radioactive. Thank you. Tokyo official blast parents who want kids to avoid ingesting radioactivity at school. Surge in radioactive cesium causes incinerators near Tokyo to shut down. Radioactive fallout around Fukushima's incinerators being hidden. Hang on. Tokyo neighbors cesium approaching levels found in Fukushima. The Chiba incinerator dust is at a horrific 70,000 becquerels a kilogram. These are incredible numbers. You don't want to be anywhere near a 5-gallon bucket of that stuff. U.S. to burn, and they got tons of it everywhere. U.S. to burn hundreds of tons of radioactive waste. Hang on. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. These are incredible numbers. This is dirty bombs time infinity. Mystery black substances at 1 million becquerels a kilogram all over Minnesota. This is huge numbers. 10 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium in Minnesota. So you had to contaminate every other thing in between that with the same numbers or much higher. Japan government did not reveal plutonium detection, and the radiation dose from plutonium-241, for good, one of the worst ones conceivable, was 50 times higher than a total of 3 other plutonium isotopes. Possibly 20 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium in, I can't remember. That's Minnesota too. 50,000 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium in the soil near Tokyo. Terrifying that children were walking down the streets there. And you multiply that by 68 to get a square meter. Government-funded researchers see 175 billion becquerels flow per day in just one river. Of course, when you work radiation out to the gram, say it's cesium, and there's I think there's 120 curies per gram, and each curie is around 37 billion atomic decays. So 120 times 37 billion decays per second, and then you get how many decays you got per second. So they're very deceptive and dishonest when they talk about these numbers. You want to multiply the numbers by around 600, because you got to include all the other isotopes, right? Radioactivity is 6.15, and the deception, the gammas, the alphas, the emitters, the neutrons, they don't include the other emitters very rarely. Radioactivity 6.15 million becquerels detected 60 kilometers from the meltdown. Can't eat food from any of these places. Every organism in Fukushima prefecture is contaminated. 1.4 million becquerels a kilogram detected in worm feces 60 kilometers from the meltdown. And worms, that's all they do, eat and poop out the other end, right? These are incredible numbers. The last thing you want to do is eat anything in that prefecture. The nuclear industry, though, hates your guts and is doing everything it can to trick you into eating it. If you can't do that, then they'll get key positions, people in key positions in your country, to just lift regulations. And they'll just ship it in. See, Canada lifted the lid after 93 days, which is June the 14th, right? They lifted all restrictions. No more restrictions. Have a nice day. Japan was being restricted by 50 plus countries, 55 countries. And so Japan had no one to ship it to, only Canada. Despicable cowards. And so the COVID is the cover-up for the radiation food and the radioactive fallout. Tokyo neighbor cesium approaching levels found in Fukushima. I covered that one. 500,000 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium found. And again, they're only acknowledging typically just gamma, and only one type of gamma. Found 75 miles from the plant. Over 4 million becquerels a kilogram in a major city. It did not come from the iodine or the cesium, which is right. That's a very unusual. Do we even acknowledge there's something else? New study, radioactive. 100 kilometers from Fukushima, meltdowns. High level of radioactivity found extensively. The air 150 kilometers from Fukushima plant is as radioactive as by the nuclear meltdown. High levels of radioactive material in Tokyo. 170,000 becquerels a kilogram in their sewage and the excrement. These are absurd numbers. Fallout from Fukushima causing problems 180 kilometers away has all become no good. Contaminated wild vegetables, fish, wild game. Once contaminated, it's forever. 180 kilometers from Fukushima, 200 counts per minute of alpha. Then you need a beta, then you need a neutron, then you need a gamma. Daiichi Elementary, 4 million becquerels a kilogram, not millisieverts, not microsieverts, not unisieverts, but becquerels. Atomic decays per second, atoms. The pulses energy in every direction at 186,000 miles per second. And there's so much of it that they covered the planet in radioactive fallout. This model is just 20 days. So another 10 days of the model would have covered the rest of the planet, basically. This is madness. But so you don't want to bring this food into your country and end up eating it all day, each day, and your children and your friends' children and your parents and everybody else going to be eating this all day, every day. You got to be some twisted, sick coward to do something like it. It's incredible. There's something wrong with you that you want to do stuff like that. You're like, there's something missing. You're a very dangerous criminal when you think it's okay to bring radioactive food into the supermarkets and indiscriminately cause incredible diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries to entire populations so you can get a paycheck on Friday when you should be in an insane asylum with a drip, or preferably in a gas chamber with a drip. 27,000 becquerels a kilogram cesium. Again, they only acknowledge gamma, the disgusting, cowardly, despicable, hateful nuclear industry. Only acknowledges cesium. You notice that? In kindergarten near West Coast, 200 kilometers from the meltdown. Tokyo area turned out to be as contaminated as Fukushima. The air samples in Tokyo were 270 times more contaminated with gamma than global weapons fallout peak. Which, by the way, global weapon fallout changed the sex ratio of all species and all humans on the entire planet. There was more males than females, which means less births. Right? And so this whole industry is about exterminating all the species, not just humans. Forecast shows Tokyo under radiation threat on Sunday, March the 20th. That means you can't eat food from the northern prefectures. Government simulation shows radioactive plume of krypton 85, which burns a hole through your lung, ends up in your bones, and some of it ends up in your pelvis and mutates your stem cells. Tokyo, March the 15th. Reactor 3 with MOX exploded on March the 14th. MOX. Well, here's a model of Reactor 3 explosion and the radioactive fallout from France. And they're only using venting. They're not using the actual meltdown. It covers the whole planet in 16 days. In 16 days. The entire planet. And so eating food from that place, feeding it to people indiscriminately, is beyond criminal. It's hateful. It's murderous. It's attempted genocide. And it's sedition to try to do it to Taiwan. For the Taipei paper, the Taipei paper, and so we've been squeezed off, I noticed, last show and this show, just like I don't even exist. We got a poll tonight somewhere. Should the Taipei Times be changed? Did I put changed or charged? I'm an idiot. Be changed with sedition. I gotta wear my glasses, I guess. For attempting to murder Taiwanese with radiation. Yeah, so no one understands the poll, apparently. I can't believe I put an N in there, C-H-A-R. I can't even spell, can I? Let's keep going. I'm an idiot. Sue me. Well, what happened was I realized the audio wasn't very loud on episode 2 of the coronavirus files posted at my other site. So I took that copy down a few hours ago. I took the original copy, that one's 36 gigabytes or something. And I just re-recorded it and I upped the audio on it. And so that rendered 20 minutes before I went live. And because I have episode 3 is also ready now to be recorded. And then I was going to do because each episode is just a cream of, say, 2 or 3 days of the original first 100 days. And then I creamed that, which is like 340 headlines and little tidbits. And I was going to shoot a video on that because that would only be like 25 minutes long. And I got that ready. And so when I posted the poll, I don't know, because they're far apart, right? It's pretty hard to make that mistake. So I accidentally put in the wrong word. So look, radioactive fallout covers the entire planet in just 16 days. You don't want to import food from that area. Like, I feel bad for Japan, but fuck you, you murderous piece of shit. Drop dead, you scum. Rain caused 29 million becquerels a square meter in the soil, says the government, near Tokyo. 29 million. These are absurd numbers. Tokyo drinking water unsafe for infants. They were giving out bottled water, which meant now all your pipes were radioactive. All your faucets become radioactive shortly after this. It's not going to disappear. They pretended it was just iodine, see? But that's all they were doing was pretending. This is why they wanted to build their city. They're going to move the capital 200 kilometers south. Right, all kinds of headlines on it too, because they knew that the infrastructure was contaminated with just one plume. Unfortunately, it didn't stop. In fact, the fog there is at around 4,000 becquerels a kilogram of just gamma. High radioactive levels near Tokyo linked to Fukushima. Thank goodness it wasn't a different place. Also, 29 million becquerels after a single rainfall. You were supposed to run, man. See, this is what I mean. You should have sirens within 5,000 miles of a nuclear power plant in case there's an accident. It's true that about 70% of Japan's territory is polluted by Fukushima radioactive materials, and Tokyo is contaminated with highly toxic radiation. And experts worry about the catastrophic impacts on the health. Well, what would that look like, Dana? Hang on, I'll show you. Give me a chance. In 2012, they estimated 865,000 excess cancers. 860, almost a million excess cancers compared to any other year increase. Not everybody got health care, by the way. And cancer isn't the only thing you're going to get at this. By the way, you're not supposed to get cancer for a couple of years. Usually 10 or 20. When you're getting that many cancers in the first year, woo! You can't breathe the air, you can't drink the water, can't turn out good after that. 276,000 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium, again just the gamma, not alpha, beta neutrons, from the soil per kilogram is 18 million becquerels a square meter. Multiply it by 68 times 276,000 should give you 18 million becquerels. Not millisieverts, not microsieverts, not unisieverts, but becquerels. Cesium levels spiking. Tokyo up to 300,000 becquerels a square meter, and it's also home to the world's largest drinking water reservoir of its kind, built to supply 36 million people in Tokyo. 300,000 plus becquerels a square meter of radioactive iodine deposits in areas near Tokyo before the end of March. Only includes iodine 131. There's 10 times more iodine 132 for every 131. There's 30 times more iodine 133 for every 131 created. There's 31 times more iodine 129 for every 131 iodine created. And iodine 132, 133 are 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating your thyroid gland than the incredibly effective iodine 131 is. And at iodine 129, it was 15. It's a 15 million year half-life, and it was 220 million particles per liter of rainfall in Canada. In the United States, according to a study from Ottawa, Canada, the capital of Canada. And what that means is that animals and insects and birds and humans, thyroid glands are completely saturated constantly with this stuff. And this stuff is converted into, at an enormous amount, into radioactive hormones by the thyroid. And then the pituitary gland, which regulates your temperature, your stress levels, your lactations for females and for animal worlds, all kinds of incredible issues trying to raise babies. It's insidious. Tokyo area soil testing finds radioactivity up to the Chernobyl levels of 1 million becquerels a square meter. Government said nothing to fear, and then the results, 1.5 million becquerels a square meter near a church in the capital. Doctor finds uranium zirconium, which is the cladding. In Tokyo, residents' fingernails, we are becoming nuclear fuel rods, he said. Government simulation shows a radioactive plume over Tokyo, March the 15th. We'd cover that one. 40,000 microsieverts per hour at a supermarket, right? That's one of the rare ones where you see me use the word microsievert, because you didn't want to use the real numbers, which is multi-millions of becquerels. In addition to multiple spots on the property, over 100 microsieverts. And that's only supposed to be used around fuel itself, microsieverts and millisieverts and unisieverts. The best way to identify radiation is by counts per minute. Neutron beam observed 13 times. This is as bad as it gets. You know she's got China syndrome when you see that going on. 13 times on the premises of its crippled. Again, right from the get-go, you see the word crippled being used. Neutron rays measured in Tokyo. Uranium-235 found in Chiba can't be detected by most Geiger counters, neither can plutonium. Fukushima wind pattern sends vapors to Tokyo in under a day or something. So the black substance they're talking about is an algae that bioaccumulates a shocking amount of radiation. It's everywhere. The dust in the fog at 4,000 becquerels a kilogram. It never goes away. These are absurd numbers. Collectively, how can the whole, they're burning radiation in all incinerators across the country for almost a decade. That's as kooky as it gets. It's because if Iran was burning nuclear waste in their incinerators, or North Korea, the whole planet would lose its friggin' mind. 50,000 becquerels a kilogram radioactive cesium found in the soil near Tokyo. Contamination in Tokyo suburbs 3 times higher than the area a mile from Fukushima Dai-ichi. Significant contamination in Tokyo is a serious, incredible problem. Yes. It's fell all over Japan for sure, and the planet Earth. The whole planet, right, was hammered by radioactive fallout, the entire planet. But I'm trying to show that ground zero, which is Japan itself, is a nuclear wasteland, for sure. Just because you can't see it typically, or smell it, or taste it, or touch it, or hear it, or feel it, or pick it up, doesn't mean it's not. The Japan Prime Minister to study setting up alternative capital because all the drinking water is contaminated. It's time to leave Dodge, right? And the genetics of it. Another headline, Japan unveils plan to develop massive government backup city 300 miles west of Tokyo. I said 200 miles south, did I? Room for 200,000 staff. Japan government industrial complex to create small Japan in southern India. I remember that headline when it first came out. Local Tokyo officials became clear the nation radiation came further south than we thought, all the way to Tokyo. While at a nursery school with kids rolling in the dirt and tasting it. Writers obtained secret Tokyo evacuation scenario. The reactor fail as spent fuel rods melt, mix with cement, and fall into the buildings, which all happened, right? Absorbed radiation doses 132 was 10 times higher than the 131 in northern Japan. And 132 is 9 times more effective at irradiating thyroid gland, but it's also turned into radioactive hormones. Radioactive black substance found 230 kilometers from the Fukushima plant. It seems to be everywhere. And you're growing food? You wicked, hateful, crazy lunatic. 230,000 becquerels per square meter of cesium in an athlete's field. 6 times Chernobyl in Tokyo. 400,000 times normal xenon 133 levels in Chiba. The actual figures may be much higher. 20 kilometers from Tokyo. How can you eat any food in northern Japan? Why is Japan still growing food there? What's the point of poisoning everybody? You won't have any market left in the near future. Newly released NRC, why not grow somewhere else, you wicked scum? Newly released NRC email reveals radioactive technetium was detected outside of Fukushima plant, 240 kilometers from the meltdown. Curium is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. Strontium-90 found 245 kilometers from the meltdowns, 150 times background. That was October 2011. It takes around 1,000 days for strontium-90 to start peaking its production in the meltdown, apparently. And it's going to be basically 100 strontium-90 for every cesium, which is a gamma, and the other one's a beta. So you got a gamma Geiger counter, you're not going to find the strontium. High levels of strontium-90 detected. 24,000 becquerels a kilogram in the soil. Samples 250 kilometers from Fukushima. 30,000 square kilometers radioactive in Nagano. 250 kilometers from the meltdown. It stretches to Japan's west coast. Strontium found in 2,200 locations in Fukushima. And we're not talking like just random pieces, we're talking everywhere. High radiation levels 270 kilometers from the meltdown. 300 times more radiation released into the atmosphere from burning debris than claimed by the government. So these are like, holy, you can't be serious, you've done that. Iodine, which later on in the accident indicates your criticality because it has a short half-life. It means the chain reaction is ongoing. So that's 2012. Iodine levels rise 350 kilometers from the Fukushima at the sewage plant. Remember, strontium-90 doesn't peak until 1,000 days or so, and then is sustained for about 10,000 plus days from Fukushima sewage plant. And this is something we've seen. I got a whole files on just sewage plants. They can't get rid of the sewage because it's so radioactive, because people had consumed so much radiation they were excreting absurd amounts. Japanese radioactivity over 40 billion becquerels a kilogram. Large black puddles of fallout along the roadsides might well be from the inside of the failed fuel rods. Hot particles 400 kilometers from the nuclear meltdowns, 40 billion becquerels a kilogram. Government checks radiation up to 460 kilometers from the meltdown. Hot spots are spreading. 600 kilometers from the meltdown. High levels of gamma detected in Osaka Bay soil. And Osaka used to have the 3 biggest fish auction blocks on the planet. New contamination map shows cesium-137 disposition 900 kilometers from Fukushima. New contamination map shows cesium gamma only, of course. Like beta and alpha neutrons doesn't exist, you notice? Deposit over 900 kilometers from Fukushima, west of Hiroshima, where they built a city back on a nuclear bomb crater. Professor now reveals high levels of radioactive material 1,000 kilometers from Fukushima. Over 30 million tons of nuclear waste in Fukushima alone. And you can't get rid of the sewage because it's too radioactive. The firewood left 43,000 becquerels a kilogram in the ashes. So it would have been like hundreds of times higher than that. Fukushima government is dumping tons of radioactive mud from decontamination into the rivers at night. And Tokyo has the 3rd highest levels, and a large amount of radioactive dust had fallen on Tokyo. Home stores selling radioactive cement. Our houses are radioactive sooner than we would have thought. Japan government peers plan to flee Tokyo. Cowards. 1 million becquerels a kilogram all over Minnesota, where all the farms are currently hemorrhaging food across the planet. New indoor radiation dose record at Fukushima. 5 sieverts per hour at reactor 1, which we've seen numbers of 1 million, by the way, and 100,000. Maybe higher as it exceeds the capacity of the measuring device, which is 5 sieverts. Fatal radiation levels found at Fukushima, 10 sieverts per hour. So there's no nuclear scientists there. There's no academics there. There's no nuclear companies there. No nuclear students. There's none of the scumbag nuclear specialists from Taiwan are there. And he's sitting in silence while the Taipei Times tries to trick the country into importing food from a nuclear wasteland. That's sedition. It's sedition. It's despicable. Press watches as the government dumps radioactive waste in Tokyo Bay. Japan considers moving capital away from Tokyo. 12 million yen to censor Twitter being spent by a city starting to burn disaster debris. So Twitter took money to censor people from complaining about radiation or taking pictures and publishing it on Twitter. So that's 50,000 US. So it's hard to imagine they didn't keep doing it. And it's hard to imagine why anybody should trust them ever again after doing it a single time. It's absurd that the media done that. It's absurd. Japanese government agencies funding projects to monitor online info about the Fukushima crisis, around-the-clock monitoring of nuclear activists. Okay, so they covered the whole planet in radioactive fallout constantly. Eating food from the nuclear country itself, radioactive country, that's the definition of stupid or murderous. And sedition. So despite the fact that I screwed up the poll with my writing, should the Taipei Times be charged with sedition? Two people doesn't think so for some reason, but like they're purposely trying to trick the country into poisoning everybody in the country. That's sedition. That's the definition of evil. Yeah, the whole problem is, Shayla, there's not really anybody out there we can trust to do the testing. Because otherwise they would be testing it and showing us, and everybody going like, holy crap. And the equipment is about 50,000. And you actually got to know what you're doing on top of that to get the real result out of it. And it's just, the whole facet of this is just mind-boggling. No matter how you look at it, it's just mind-boggling. Why would you take food from a nuclear wasteland? I just marched you right across the country from Fukushima all the way past Hiroshima, all the way past Osaka, all the way past Hiroshima, all the way to the end of the prefecture. And I can take you, bear with me, and I did. I showed you models of the radioactive fallout. But just bear with me 1 second. Let's see if I can find. I mean, these are lunatics. Why grow food in a nuclear wasteland? Why grow it right alongside the bags of radiation and then harvest it too? And these pictures are coming from the media in Japan saying farmers are suffering from unfounded rumors. And they show you this picture. Like, how is that an unfounded rumor? It just makes you never want to read the paper again, I suppose. Don't it? Yeah, Lorraine Moret would probably, I don't know if she's got the equipment, but she might have friends that got it. Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Taiwan should not take food from a nuclear wasteland when they can get it from somewhere else. There's no excuse ever to take it from a nuclear wasteland just because you got a bunch of scum lunatics that think that poisoning everybody is a quick way to make some money. Those people should definitely be arrested, charged with sedition, and if hanging is legal, then you should publicly hang them. If not, try to lock them up for the rest of their natural lives and make documentaries about them, what kind of monsters they are. Gonna create genocides by poisoning everybody in increments. Ooh, yeah, let's call her a day, I suppose. So I got to take the show part 2, stick that on the other computer and let it run all night to compress it down to go up on BitChute. And I got totally censored, didn't I? That's just ridiculous in the last couple of days. Well, it's been going on for quite a long time. We used to have 24,000 subscribers, and they just closed my account randomly. No emails, no explanations, no strikes. Just get lost. We're the nuclear industry now. We got our guys in the YouTube. Warren says, is that the woman who always wears black leather? No. Now, she's an academic, and she tutored under another person, and she was basically became famous after the depleted uranium that they used in Iraq and Afghanistan. That when that information finally broke, she was able to come out and articulate it, and that A-10 Warthogs were they only shoot dirty bombs, depleted uranium munitions. And 33 votes, 91% will end the vote poll there. My apologies for butchering it. And let me shout out everybody quickly before we call it a night. I'll go up to the top this time, just come straight down. How about that? Colette S. Yeah, Dana, your last 2 videos on BitChute are all static for sound. Thanks a lot, eh? I didn't know that, and I don't think they were originally, is the problem with this. Now, I took one down a few hours ago, the one I put up yesterday, and I redone that tonight. I'll have that back up tomorrow with higher audio. I don't know, it seems like I'm losing audio. It's the same audio we're using right now. Right, so how does it disappear when I put it up on BitChute? Because originally I played it after on BitChute, and it seemed fine. I checked it tonight, and there's hardly any audio there. But anyway, just in case, I reformatted it, the original files from yesterday, and I tweaked the audio up really high, and I'll publish that tomorrow morning, hopefully sometime, part 2. I'll take down part 1 at that time, and then I'll redo that and repost that hopefully tomorrow. Part 3 is ready to be recorded, and I'll try to catch up I'm totally surprised that I've done that, because you can see I posted a lot of other videos. They're all fine. But those 2 on the coronavirus, that were really nice ones too, hardly any noise. There is sound, but you need very quiet. You need headphones on, and it's still not very loud. I was totally surprised when I checked it tonight. Hi, Tim Norris. Thank you. Thank you so much. Richard, Invisible Rabbit, P Answer, P Swear, rather. 239 Giant, which is Joe Moore. Joe Moore's actually been on TV fighting up in Rocky Flats. He was poisoned as a kid by plutonium and suffered incredible health problems, debilitating health problems the rest of his life. It's just such a heartbreaking story. Albert, and so hugs out for 239 Giant, which is Joe. James Lucid. Dana Nasana. Hi, everybody. Again, I forgot to wear my glasses for this part. I can actually make it a bit bigger. That helps. I'm just scrolling from the top down, and then we'll get to the bottom, and I'll say, so long. And get a cup of tea. I gotta transfer the files over to another computer and I'll probably shoot the other one tomorrow morning. I might shoot number 3 tonight. After this. Tree fruit. Just double checking for names. The show's over. I'll do a quick shout out to the people that happen to be in the comment section, to those that are sitting back. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming by. I like doing this as a switch. It's a way of switching off for me. And it's okay to say hi to the diehards that are just like me out there. Christopher, we're almost through the names here now, back down. And so we're supposed to get snow every day for the next 7 days. The first day is around 10 centimeters, the next day 5, the next day 1 or 2, the next day 5, next day 1 or 2, the next day 5, the next day 1 or 2, the next day 5. And so I'll be able to get out in that kind of weather with fresh snow coming, looking for tracks. Super excited to get some research in. Shayla White. Hi, Shayla. And remember, folks, you can't read the comments scrolling. Scrolling. I read some because it just works that way, right? If you stop for a second, you end up reading something. Nirad Yaloff. Probably butchered the name. Thank you, Shayla. Have a great night, everybody. I got a tendency to miss a few names for some reason. Timeless Truth, see? I went right past the name, never seen it. Scrolling back up, one more. Colette S. Good night, everyone. That's it. Yeah, good night, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Last show of the week. It depends, because we're doing the coronavirus files now. And part 3 is a doozy, eh? And I apologize that parts 1 and 2 don't seem to have no sound. They're in, I guess they really don't, it's so low. I don't understand that, but I was hoping I post it again. It somehow works out. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, folks. And a great day tomorrow. Take care.